I've been hearing about closing Guantanamo since I actually got to Guantanamo. I was taken to Guantanamo in the beginning of 2003, and since then I've been hearing that they're going to close Guantanamo.
Secret evidence. Somebody is accused of something that he doesn't know why he is locked up.
Last spring, President Obama promised to close Guantanamo Bay within a year. But the deadline was 2 months ago, and the prison camp is still open. What's going to happen to the remaining prisoners?
Guantanamo Bay detention facility opened 4 months to the day of 9/11. It opened on January 11th, 2002. And because it was so close to the event, and to the disastrous event, Americans both inside the White House, inside the executive, and outside were still living under the trauma of the immediate attack. And as a result, when Americans were told the worst of the worst were coming to Guantanamo Bay, that's what we all thought. And that's the context under which it opened.
When the military commanders, our military commanders in Afghanistan were telling us, we're capturing guys, we cannot keep them safely here in Afghanistan for fear that they'll be killed by incoming mortars or whatnot, but we have a duty to keep them safely. There was a need to, number one, detain them safely, and then two, because this war, much more so than previous wars, is dependent on exploitation of intelligence, we needed a place where we could strategically interrogate them. Long-term, rapport-building, interrogate them lawfully.
Getting to Guantanamo Bay is disorientating. We arrived by plane and then took a boat to the base. We were accompanied by military personnel at all times. We were not allowed to talk to the prisoners or the Red Cross workers who do talk to them. At the end of each day, our images were screened frame by frame. Lots of them were erased. We couldn't film prisoners' faces or control towers or take wide shots of the bay. The soldiers drove us around very slowly, first to the site of the original Camp X-Ray, which is now abandoned. We weren't allowed a close look because they said it was full of iguanas, snakes and banana rats.
Pochi mesi dopo l'11 settembre, I primi prigionieri
A few months after 9/11, the first prisoners were brought here and housed in small cages with aluminium roofs under the tropical sun. Although it was only used for 4 months, all the best-known Guantanamo images are of Camp X-Ray. The chicken wire, the orange jumpsuits, and prisoners suspected of Al-Qaeda links. The camp was extremely basic, with no running water and no indoor shelter. But why were the prisoners brought here in the first place? Guantanamo is a US military base in Cuba. The US granted the lease of this place 100 years ago after the Spanish War. The US still pays rent to Cuba. Originally they paid in gold. Now they pay $4,000 a year. But since Guantanamo isn't on American soil, American law doesn't apply here, meaning the prisoners here have no legal rights.
If you bring somebody now to the United States, they will claim constitutional rights. I think there was no appetite in the Democratic or the Republican caucus whatsoever to import terrorists into the United States and keep them safely. We didn't know when the next attack was going to happen.
The first prisoners came to Camp X-Ray from Afghanistan in 2002 and were defined as enemy combatants in the war against terrorism. As such, they were detained without any charges being brought, and they were interrogated.
When I first came here, I was impressed. It was not what I used to see on TV. It's not, what was claimed. I mean, even that detainee, he told me, these are the same group of people who make claims and make up lies to tell the world, that these things are going on here.
You mean it was much better than...
It was much better than what was planted in my own head.
Today, Guantanamo is a huge, sophisticated structure housing 183 inmates. We were shown round Camp 5, a high-security facility for both compliant and non-compliant prisoners, who are the only ones still dressed in orange. But we weren't allowed to film our guide's face.
This room here, this is the TV room, and it's for compliant detainees only. Okay? We offer them 3 different types of newspapers, 15 different DVDs each week, so that they can make their selection. The satellite, we also offer a satellite, 6 different TV channels from the Middle East, and it's mainly sports and news channels.
There are rooms in the corners. They have a TV set, a refrigerator, a blue chair. You'll see the ring in the floor, which is actually to affix a shackle. Some of those rooms are being used over there for TV rooms as well, so they're dual purpose. A detainee might be questioned for intelligence purpose in the room and then later on be allowed in the room alone to watch a DVD.
Intelligence gathering is still one of the main tasks in Guantanamo. But serious allegations have been made about the interrogation methods used here, especially in the early years.
Oh, the allegations?
Yeah, where did
the allegations are that the one detainee was subjected to practices, although they don't rise to the level of torture. But they were outside and beyond policy, and ultimately were investigated by 2 general officers who wrote a very extensive study in terms of the shortcomings in the practices, and there were admonishments. And the ultimate finding was that the cumulative effects of the treatment of the detainee were considered degrading, humiliating or degrading.
In the 8 years since Guantanamo opened, 600 prisoners have been released, and some report that they've been violently mistreated.
A guard put 2 fingers into my eyes. And because I didn't scream, he thought he wasn't pushing enough. So he continued pushing his fingers into my eyes. And the officer was standing saying more. He was shouting at him because I wasn't screaming. He was thinking that I'm not, he did not push his hand too much. And even the guard was screaming, saying, I am, at the end, because he was pushing his hand too much.
Omar Deghez was born in Libya and grew up in the UK. After his studies, he travelled to Afghanistan and Pakistan, a journey that seemed suspicious, too similar to a classic terrorist's route. He was picked up in Pakistan, and after 6 years in Guantanamo, he was cleared and released with no charge. He now lives in the UK and works for the human rights association Reprieve.
Sometimes they say, the medical will come and say, and you look at the records and you say, if you want any help, ask your interrogator. This was something which is always done by the med. This is why we wanted to bring a case against many of the medical staff.
I know the truth of what goes on here, and the truth is that these detainees are treated very humanely. There's no abuse. They've never suffered any abuse here, and that's the truth. I'm obligated to tell the truth because it's against the law for me not to. The detainees that are here are not obligated to tell the truth. As a matter of fact, their doctrine, their training, the Manchester document, some other documents, it tells them to not tell the truth about the conditions of detention. And that's why the stories of torture are so widespread because that's what they're trained to do.
But in 2002, lawyers for the Bush administration sanctioned in written memos a series of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. Waterboarding is the most notorious. This is a simulation carried out during a demonstration in front of the White House. President Obama has unequivocally condemned and outlawed all harsh interrogation techniques. The authors of the so-called torture papers were originally judged as guilty of misconduct, but just a few weeks ago they were cleared. What they wrote and what they did was within the law at that time.
This is a Department of Justice report that was released 2 weeks ago about the lawyers who wrote the torture memos and that proved the whole torture regime that the U.S. used. And as you can see, a lot of it is redacted, meaning that we still don't know what it says because it's still classified. But there is a substantial part of this report that is not redacted, and what it says is quite extraordinary. And just for example, among those techniques, the enhanced interrogation techniques that were approved for use on detainees included the waterboard, number 11, and it describes what it is. Use of diapers, stress positions. Here are some others. Cramped confinement. The subject is placed in a confined space, typically a small or large box, which is usually dark. Slapping, walling, where the person is really basically thrown by his head and shoulders into the wall. This was approved by the lawyers at the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, the White House. I mean, this went all the way to the top.
At Guantanamo, hearings are held in courts called military commissions. We were only allowed to film this corner of the building where hearings take place. These hearings are not conducted according to normal civilian or military justice rules. And they've been criticized for the kind of evidence they accept.
Hearsay evidence can be admitted. And the reason hearsay evidence is ordinarily not admitted in regular U.S. courts is not for some arbitrary procedural rule, but because we've determined that it's not good evidence. It's difficult to know if the evidence is true if you don't have the person who actually made the statement in front of you.
Now a terrorism counsellor for Human Rights Watch, Anna Bressanin was one of the first attorneys to arrive in Guantanamo. She was a lawyer in the Hamdan case, one of only 3 that have been heard by a military commission.
This is the first courthouse, the military commissions building. It's called Courtroom 1. Here. And then this is the actual trial taking place. So you can see because the jury is here. They're called the members in a military commission. A witness is testifying there in the witness box. This is the judge, a Navy captain. This is one of Mr. Hamdan's civilian defense attorneys, Harry Schneider. This is Mr. Hamdan here, and the defense interpreter, Chuck Schmitz.
I see. And where are you normally?
I'm kind of right here, unfortunately, in this particular rendering.
The military commission system has operated from the start on trial and error, and most of the time error, because what you had was judges operating without rules. They either made up their own rules, they proceeded without any rules, or they would adjourn and wait for rules, which meant serious delays of weeks and months, and we have years now, and we still don't have a set of rules for the new commissions. And there was one detainee who didn't want a lawyer, he wanted to represent himself, yet there was no provision in those rules that a detainee could represent himself. So it created this problem for the judge who didn't know how to handle it. In fact, I remember vividly the judge's reaction, which was to do this. And so every time we'd reached something that had not been accounted for in the rules, this was the judge's reaction. And so that's basically what the system was about. It's really been about that for the whole time.
Only one Guantanamo detainee has had a civil trial in New York. Military commissions are considered more appropriate because they accept evidence collected in the battlefield and they protect intelligence sources. So if a detainee is ever going to have any kind of a trial, it is very likely going to be heard by a military commission. But many of those in Guantanamo will not have any trial process at all.
since we have had a lot of assaults dealing with feces, this is our box that we came up with, and the detainee that assaults, they get placed inside one of these cells that has one of these boxes on it.
To minimize the contact.
Yes. Well, not necessarily minimize the contact, but we had to come up with something so these guys wouldn't be able to keep assaulting our guards.
He was an officer who had the spray. It was a small hole, bean hole, and he was trying to spray my face and everything to burn. And I was pushing his hand out. So another officer was standing next to him. I was pushing my hand, so he closed the bean hole on my hand. And then because I didn't scream, he was closing more and more and more. I didn't scream, so he was like pushing hard and hard until he broke the finger. So the finger was crushed inside the small door.
Having tools to minimize contact between guards and prisoners is just one aspect of this place. Guantanamo has developed a lot in 8 years. Camp 6 is a very modern medium security facility.
Questo è quello che riceve un detenuto del campo numero 6, delle coperte.
This is standard issue for detainees in Camp 6. White and beige clothes and an eye mask, because here the lights are never turned off.
In questa cella la luce non si spegne mai.
Some camps, like Camp 7, are completely secret because they house so-called high-value prisoners.
These people were detained on a battlefield, and they're here to keep them from attacking our country again. They either were in direct support or actually attacking either U.S. forces or supporting those government folks in Afghanistan that were supporting the al-Qaeda network that attacked us. So it's hard to say guilt or innocence because that's not the term you use for these folks. They haven't gone to a court setting. So intelligence doesn't try to discern guilt or innocence. Intelligence tries to discern what his intent and what his capability is, and it doesn't make a judgment whether he's innocent or guilty. So I would tell you that I think most of the vast majority of the folks that have come through here, and certainly the ones that are here, were not these innocent goat herds that are so frequently characterized in the press. They're not. They weren't in Tora Bora, in the late fall of 2001, on a fundraising trip.
The authorities say there are nearly 50 prisoners who are too dangerous to be freed, but there is no framework under which to prosecute them. The US has banned ex-Guantanamo detainees from entering the US for any reason other than to be prosecuted. So even if the US government built a new prison in Illinois, say, they couldn't take them there. But why can't they be prosecuted?
Why? It's because some of them, because of the circumstances under which they were captured and the information we have about them, cannot be prosecuted.
Why cannot they be prosecuted?
We have arrangements with security services of many of the world's countries. And those arrangements are classified and sensitive and may involve sources or methods or individuals on how we got certain information. And part of those, some of those agreements may have clauses that require us not to turn over to the court or anyone outside the executive branch how we get the information about the individual.
But some of the detainees who are not considered dangerous are in the same boat, although for a different reason. They can't be released because they have nowhere to go. Half the remaining prisoners in Guantanamo, around 100 people, are classified as highly compliant and live peaceful, ordinary lives in Camp 4. They have a library. They take language classes. Harry Potter is the most requested book. They have a selection of magazines to read.
Like we do have some material blocked out that might be offensive to the detainee.
So this was probably a woman?
Yeah, it might have been a woman on the motorcycle.
There are 1,100 guards in Guantanamo. Their average age is 23, and they normally spend 1 year here working 12-hour shifts in rotation. They're also waiting to go home.
We talk with them. I would say we joke around a lot. Not, joking around to take away from the job, but, you pass little riddles back and forth or silly little random jokes.
Like what?
It's slightly inappropriate. You totally got me with that one the other day. What's brown covered with eyes and white on the inside? A potato. You find fun, you find things to do. When you're on an island for 12 months, you eventually find yourself having done everything, but you have fun. We do barbecues, we rent boats from the NWR facility in the marina, we go fishing, diving, they offer classes.
It's one of the ironies of Guantanamo. There is an elementary school, there is a Girl Scout troop, there's I saw a ballet performance with little girls in tutus, and people go snorkeling and scuba diving on the beach when just down the road there's this terrible symbol of torture and inhumane treatment.
After a whole year of reviewing each case, nearly 100 men have been cleared for release. But by law, they can't go to America. No ex-Guantanamo detainees can. So Washington is asking Europe to take prisoners that the US won't take.
That's the thing in Guantanamo. You could be innocent. They would know that you're innocent. They'll tell you face to face, we know you haven't done anything. You could be cleared through the process they have in Guantanamo, yet they will still hold you sometimes because there's no place to take people. There are innocent people in Guantanamo, innocent by the standard of the U.S. authorities, not by my standard. But unfortunately, the number of countries that are willing to take people is very little.
I've seen, I've watched my clients come off the plane from Guantanamo and hug their brothers for the first time, so I know it can happen. But for some of the cases, it's going to be difficult, particularly for the refugees. So these are people from Algeria, from Libya, from Tunisia, who maybe had no problem with the government before, but just because they were taken to Guantanamo Bay, they're marked. Everyone knows everything that's been said about these guys, and even though it tends to be false time and again, these governments have targeted them, and we know that they'll be tortured if they're sent back. So they've told us, yes, Guantanamo is terrible. Of course I want to leave this place, but please, please just let me stay here until you can find a safe place for me to go.
But it's hard to find countries that will accept these people as refugees, especially for the 80 Guantanamo detainees from Yemen. After the failed terrorist attacks last Christmas and the claims from Al-Qaeda in Yemen, no European country wants to accept people from there. But sending them back home seems too risky. Risk and fear. The Yemeni are not the only ones who can't leave.
My youngest grandson is like 14 months. I'm an old man who would really rather be with his grandchildren.
You should leave this job.
I'm not going to leave this job as long as these detainees are here and someone's obligated and responsible for their care and custody. That's going to be me. I'm going to be one of them, one of the people who do that. Notwithstanding the international public scorn I derive from that, I really believe it contributes to my youngest grandson growing up safe and possibly my granddaughter surviving her experience as a soldier in the U.S. Army.
So we left Guantanamo. with the impression that everybody seems to be stuck there. The prisoners, the officers, and even Barack Obama's brave promises.